Hello, colleagues. We are ready to go. It is 12:01, so I'm going to call the 9th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee to order. First, we would like to acknowledge that the City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape-Pewuk, and Attawandaron peoples, and we honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or phone 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. And we will begin the meeting by looking to any disclosures of pecuniary interest from committee members. I see none. So moving on to the consent agenda. I've not been made aware of any items individuals wish pulled, but I will look to the committee now to ask if any items need to be pulled to be voted on separately. Mayor Holder. You are muted, Your Worship. We're going to need you to start from the top after you click that unmute. We still can't hear you. Oh, try now.
Hey, thank you very much. You didn't let me in there.
The clerks wanted a quick meeting, so
yeah, I'll be brief.
We apparently had you on mute on this end.
Am I still muted, Chair?
No, you're coming through loud and clear now. Did you have some items that you wish pulled for separate vote from the consent agenda?
Separate comments. So I don't need them pulled. I'll speak to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I did not see anyone else indicating they wanted anything pulled. So we will actually go right to you, Your Worship, for comments on any of the consent items you wish to comment on.
Thanks very much. 2.1, the corporate mileage rate chart. I know we have, this doesn't impact me, but it does impact council members. Just a question. In my private or business life, and even when I have begged with RevCan for automobile allowances in the old days, we only had a flat rate. And I note that we've got a double rated system. And I just was inquiring why there would be, why the first 5,000 kilometers for a council member's mileage is more significant than the second part. Why it's just not a flat rate period? I wonder if I could get clarity from staff, perhaps Ms. Barbone.
Well, let's see if Ms. Barbone can provide you an answer on that. Okay, we'll get you unmuted there, Ms. Barbone. Just give us one moment.
Thank you. Through your worship, through the chair, I had a message that came up that said we were not allowed to unmute ourselves. So the clerks might need to do something magical on their end to allow us to unmute to answer questions. Through the chair. So what we are proposing is CRA actually uses a two-tiered a rate for the first 5,000 and then a rate afterwards. The City of London and our recommendation from Civic Administration is to use one rate for all kilometers at a rate that we are proposing at 59 cents for simplicity and to ease the administrative burden, noting that the majority of our kilometers fall within that amount. So I believe that answers his worship's question that we are proposing only a flat rate at the CRA rates that were in effect for 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Barbone.
That is a comment, and I'm glad to see a flat rate. It makes more sense. I guess the obvious question to me that is, if 61 cents for 2022 made sense, why are we averaging it out? I guess I get a sense, but if it was, I don't know how many, I don't know kilometerage that the councilors charge out, but why not 61, or is it just an arbitrary number trying to average it out to make some sense?
Thank you, Your Worship. Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through the chair. So what we are proposing is to, because of we are not using that blended rate, is to go with the 2021 rate, to use a singular rate, which is looking at all the various rates. We did a poll across other municipalities. We look at what the province and the feds are using, and this is what our recommendation is, to use one amount for all the mileage. So we're not entirely up to date with CRA, but because they use a blended rate, this allows us to go with a singular rate and easy administrative burden. And our intent is that going forward, we would match as the CRA rates change, we would be able to maintain being in line as those rates go, albeit 1 year behind.
Thank you very much. I mean, this has been the year where gas has really soared, if I can put it that. And I'm not going to argue this unless councillors have a very strong view. It just seems to me that that's certainly, I'm glad it's a blended rate now. I think that makes a world of sense. But to have the lower rate with gas is so high, just strikes me as, I think it could, I think the argument of 61 could have been made. It's not my place to argue for council members, but just an observation. That's all I have to add, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. And we've got Councillor Hamou on the speakers list next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I have a question for Ms. Barbone or for staff. How often is this policy reviewed, firstly?
Well, we'll get Ms. Barbone to respond. I know that the rates are, she's indicated annually, but how often is the policy reviewed, Ms. Barbone?
So thank you, through the chair. This policy has been a blended rate and has formally sat in various areas historically up until now. So the policy, as you can see, we've been reviewing it, but there has not been changed to the mileage rate for a very significant period of time. Our intent going forward is that this will now be reviewed on a regular basis and keep in line with what CRA is doing going forward, so that we do not get significantly behind going forward. So I anticipate going forward, it will be done on an annual basis.
Thank you, Ms. Barbone. Any follow-up, Councillor Hamou?
I do have one follow-up, and thank you for that, that clarification. The second question I have is about EVs and hybrid vehicles, and will there be any allowances going forward for those types of mileage concerns?
Ms. Barbone?
Thank you, through the chair. So right now there is one mileage rate for all vehicles based on that. So we do not have a blended rate for different types of vehicles at this point. I'm not aware of any other municipality at this point that has a blended rate for type of vehicle, but it is something that we will certainly take a look to see if there is any emerging trends that evolve that we will need to have separate rates. It's certainly something that's very challenging to try to administer based on what kind of vehicle that they're using, and we'll have to look into that further.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hamou and Ms. Barbone. Are there any further comments or questions from colleagues? Your Worship?
Only to say I never knew mileage rates could be so excessive. That's all.
Thank you, Your Worship. If colleagues will indulge, I'm going to ask just one quick question of staff through the chair. As Mayor Holder actually referenced the impact that this could have on councillors. Councillors also have the ability to just do a flat monthly rate for their mileage. So Ms. Barbone, I'm wondering, is this policy change going to reflect that allowance as well, or is that something that would have to be looked at separately?
Thank you through the chair. So this does not, right now, the election is with the individual counselor as to which one you choose. So we have not made an amendment at this time for that other flat rate. So the election is still available to the counselor, but something certainly we will investigate further as to what those changes would need to do. That's probably something that we would do at the start of the year or the start of the council term to reflect another change in that policy.
Great, thank you for that. I don't see any other hands raised for comments or questions, so I'm going to look for a mover and a seconder for the items on the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Fife Millar and seconded by Councillor Hamou. The mayor has more questions. Oh, Mayor Holder. We're going to have to get you to unmute again, Your Worship.
Sorry, before we vote on the consent agenda, I have a comment on 2.2 question as well.
Certainly.
Thanks. If I may, probably to Ms. Barbone as well. Thank you for the report on Bud Gardens. It's been a pretty tough year for everyone. I think we recognize that, and certainly the Bud, and they're providing us the minimum requirement here, a payment of $50,000, and there's some ticket sales as well. I understand if I've read this correctly, under the financial highlights 3.1 on page 7, that we don't assist in funding the financial loss, which I get, but due to the partnership agreement, any losses incurred will be recouped against future profits that are earned by Bud Gardens. What is the baseline for the Bud's losses? I'm trying to understand what that means. When is it a loss or a gain? They gain pennies, but like modest dollars. But if they're going to offset that, what are they offsetting against? Where's that baseline number? I didn't see it.
Well, I think Ms. Barbone is probably the best person to ask for her wisdom on that, so we'll go back to Ms. Barbone.
Thank you through the chair. So the way the agreement works is that the partnership essentially is operated by Global Spectra, which is now OEV 360. So on an annual basis, based on the entity that operates, there has been traditionally profits that are paid to the city, and the city recoups 70% of that share. So when you look at page 36 of the council agenda, you can see up until 2017 that there has been traditionally revenue and or net income that has been generated by the entity, which is Bud Gardens. So at the end of the day, essentially the way it works, and it's a very complicated formula and the agreement is fairly large, but in simple terms to be able to say is that with the losses that have been incurred, any of the revenue at the end of the day that the Bud Gardens is able to earn will go to repay the cash flow losses that have occurred. So I anticipate we will have likely at least a few more years where the city will only receive the minimum share of the $50,000 until the entity is able to recoup those losses that it sustained. So the beauty of this partnership agreement, ultimately where this entity operates, is that the city has not been out of pocket to manage the severe losses that they've had throughout 2020 and 2021. The entity has been able and fairly profitable and taken drastic measures to be able to remain sustainable over that period of time. So as this now starts to rebuild and we start to see some profitableness of the entity again, those will then repay those losses, and then the city will be in a position again to reap the benefits of that net income once it is able to get past the sustainability point. So, so I suspect it'll take a few years before that's there, but certainly so far, with respect to their year that started at the end of June, it's we're now starting to see with the beginning of the year and the end half of the year to start to be profitable again, with everything being opened fully and events starting to come back. So we're very hopeful, and they've done a very good job to minimize the extent of the losses that ultimately come to the city at the end of the day. And we've been able to withstand that by not having to share in the losses directly, but we will lose the revenue to repay that. So our risk has been minimized ultimately, and we have not been out of pocket, but it will take some time before we start to see the influx of income come to the city going forward.
Thank you, Ms. Barbone. Your worship?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Barbone. You know, when I look at the performance summary on page 36, I note that in 2021, notwithstanding a brutal event income, they had other incomes. Budweiser Gardens or the new entity had other incomes to offset that as well. So it showed an operating profit of 2020. Well, you're going to help me. In 2020, the actual was significant loss there. What's the incentive for any organization to prune down fixed expenses that would absolutely contribute to the bottom line? Are we using then? I guess what I'm asking, are we using 2020's actual as the baseline for loss and carrying that forward? Because that would suggest to me, depending on the impact, that we could have a number of years of $50,000 plus some ticket sales. It looks like, is that the case? Am I reading that correctly?
Thank you, Your Worship. You were breaking up a little there, so I think the question was, are we using 2020 as the baseline for the losses through the course of the pandemic? If that's helpful, Ms. Barbone. And again, Your Worship, if I'm putting words in your mouth, I apologize. But there were a couple of moments there where you were breaking up a little bit.
Well, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you through the chair. That did help clarify. So essentially, that is the way that it works. There are some adjustments based on the calculations, which are much more detailed than just what you see here, that allow for cash flows with respect to other loans that have been approved with respect to the initial inception. So there are some adjustments, but essentially, based on those adjustments, you are looking at what the net cash flow is. So it's not exactly what the net income is. So the loss in theory is slightly a little bit greater than that, just because there are some additional calculations behind the scenes. But in theory, that is basically how it works, where you see those losses now start to be recouped by the revenue that's going to go against it, with some adjustments that are based on the detailed agreement that the city manages with them.
Mayor Holder?
A final question, and thank you. Final question, Ms. Barbone, through the chair. And that is, you said that for the next while, I'm paraphrasing poorly, we will anticipate the minimum. I look at some exciting program events coming up for 2022 and beyond, thank God. So the question is, how long do you think that the minimum will be our future in terms of those payments from Bud Gardens through to us based on activities?
Well, Your Worship, I would suggest that depends on how many tickets you're buying for the Briar, but let's see what Ms. Barbone has to say.
Thank you through the chair. I wish I had a crystal ball to be able to anticipate exactly how long that would take. It really all depends on what the net income and net cash flow would be, and how great to the positive it would be as to how many years it'll take to repay that debt. So I mean, if we're optimistic, perhaps it's only 2 to 3 years. It all depends. And that's something based on the inflationary factors and how quickly people come back to a full house at Bud Gardens is really going to see ultimately how big a profit they have and how great and how quickly that can be repaid. So I don't have, unfortunately, a specific date or time that I can tell you, but if we were optimistic, perhaps 2 to 3 years, but I think that's certainly very optimistic.
Thank you, Ms. Barbone. I think Mayor Holder indicated that was his last question, so we'll move to Deputy Mayor Morgan next.
Yes, I'm going to ask a question on the heels of the mayor's question. First, I'll make a comment. I know we're talking about some financial challenges with the organization, but I do think that there's a piece of good news in this report that we should draw attention to, and that is next year we will make the final payment on the outstanding debt for Budweiser Gardens, which has been a long time coming, but will be a great milestone to achieve in the history of that facility. My question is for Ms. Barbon. In future reports, given the complexity of the recouping of the cash flow losses, and given you anticipate it being a number of years, could you endeavor to put that in the staff report so that we have a sense on what the losses are, how much was recouped with the city only taking the minimum payment that year, and what we're looking forward to in the future? I know it'll be very hard to predict the exact time frame, but if we could have a segment of the report dedicated towards tracking that over time, I think that would help us with our questions that we'll have at this meeting on how that changes over the next few years. So my question is to Ms. Barbon if she could endeavor to do that in future reports.
Well, let's ask her. Ms. Barbon, is that possible to reflect in our future reports?
Certainly there's differences. So what we would do is we'll take that back and look at what the best way would be to communicate that so that it doesn't create confusion with all the reconciliation on the actual agreement that is done behind the scenes. But we'll certainly endeavor to communicate that in a very clear fashion in a separate section in the report going forward so that the municipal council can see how we're tracking.
Great, and I see the deputy mayor giving a thumbs up to that answer, so I will move to the, oh, no, he has one follow-up.
No, I am going to say thank you to Ms. Barbon. I think that will endeavor to speed up the process of questions at this meeting. Otherwise, you'll probably get a lot of questions from councillors over the next couple of years while we go through this. But if there's a way to articulate in the report what's happening, it will remind us of this particular situation and that there's a number of years that we'll be going through to essentially fill that hole.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morgan, and we'll go next to Councillor Hamou.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is to staff. I know other municipalities are also facing some of the similar problems with these venues. Are we, just if you have any information, are we on par with other municipalities with regards to this, to these venues?
Ms. Barbon?
Thank you. Through the chair. So London actually, so from a venue perspective, their experience has been very similar to what other venues of similar type and size have had from an experience perspective across Ontario and also across Canada. What I would suggest is that the agreement that the City of London has with the Bud Gardens specifically has actually, the model we have here in London is exceptional from a risk and reward perspective in that many other municipalities fund those venues directly and are out of pocket directly. So our agreement is unique in that we have been mitigated from all the losses going throughout COVID, and that the venue manager has done an exceptional job in trying to minimize expenditures where possible, to minimize ultimately what the impact is also through what they have to manage and through ultimately what the challenge is for the City of London. So from a impact perspective, I would say we are in a far better place than the majority of other venues across Ontario and Canada with respect to the agreement specifically.
Thank you, Ms. Barbon. Councillor Hamou, anything further?
No, that's it. Thank you so much for that answer.
All right, we'll look to see if there's any other questions or comments briefly on anything on the consent agenda. I'm seeing none from committee members. I don't see any hands up from visiting council members. So we'll get the clerk to open the vote now on the consent agenda.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on, we have no scheduled items today. We have one item under item number 4, items for direction. It's the consideration of appointment to the Ecological Community Advisory Committee, requires up to 2 members. We have 3 applications that we have received on the agenda. I will draw colleagues' attention to the fact that we also had a communication from Mr. Levin encouraging us to consider appointing all 3, and he did note, given the technical nature of this committee, and that some people would be taking sabbaticals and other things during the course of this committee's work, that it might be valuable to have an extra person. So I just wanted to make sure that all colleagues were aware that communication had just gone through. And I see both the clerk and Councillor Cassidy's hands up on this one. So I'm going to go to the clerk first and then to Councillor Cassidy.
Through the chair, I just wanted to point out for the committee's information is that the appointment of 3 would exceed what's been approved by council for the membership of that committee. We weren't aware of any other communication with respect to this. Otherwise, I would have highlighted that earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, clerk. And we'll go to Councillor Cassidy next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm prepared to move at this time that, notwithstanding the terms of reference and the limit of 15 members, that we appoint all 3 of these individuals to this committee. As you pointed out, it's a very technical committee. The expertise is quite specific, and having heard from the former chair of EPAC that all of these people would be welcome and valuable added members, I'm prepared to move all 3 of them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. We'll look to see if there's a seconder for that. I'm not sure if Mayor Holder's hand is up to second or not, but I see Councillor Hamou is willing to second that. So we will put that on the floor and we will go to Mayor Holder next.
Thanks, Chair. I have deep respect for Sandy Levin and the work that the committee does. You know, why not 17? Why not 23? I know we're asking for 1 more and it doesn't sound like much, but there's a principle I think that's involved. And I think that part of the argument I read that if somebody leaves, then we've got someone that can fill the gap. I'm sure people can sit in as a guest as they choose to know the issues in the event that somebody retires early, and then that person would be given appropriate consideration. We've set a number because arbitrarily, because otherwise, what is the number? And frankly, I won't support it. I think we'll pick 2 people, all 3, as Councillor Cassidy rightly pointed out, and was suggested by Mr. Levin, exceptionally qualified or very well qualified. But you know, why do we set numbers except that we have something to work with that I think is manageable? It's been deemed that that's manageable. No reflection on any of the 3 at all. But I just think at some point we have to say, you know, we're there for a reason. This isn't the biggest issue this council is going to deal with, but on the other hand, we do get to a point where we say, how high is high, and when's the number not the right number? If it was the wrong number, perhaps when we deliberated on committees, we should have said there should be 16, not 15. So with deep respect, I will not be supporting the motion proposed to move this to 16 for the reasons I've mentioned.
Thank you, Your Worship. And we do have a motion that all 3 be appointed. We'll deal with that first. If that isn't passed, then we would go to a vote on these individuals. I do want to just ask for the record and for colleagues' understanding through the clerk. Were 2 of these individuals that were appointed to another committee that were encouraged to submit applications for this particular committee?
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, that's correct. 2 of these individuals are appointed to a different committee and are serving on that committee, and 1 in particular has expressed their interest to continue to serve specifically on both committees should they be appointed today. I would like to also, if I may, through the chair, just confirm what the mayor has indicated, that the community advisory committees can bring into their discussions and meetings or subcommittee and working groups any additional individuals at any time that they may require to deal with specific matters.
Thank you for the clarification on that. Look to colleagues for any other question or comment on this. And I just want to make sure that the clerk has had time to prepare a motion moving all three. So it is in eScribe. You can see it now. And we will open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, that motion is lost, 2-4.
Colleagues, so now we will look to fill these two spaces by a vote on the candidates who have applied. And I think that given Councillor Cassidy's prior motion, I think that committee members would want to see all three names on this ballot. And I'm seeing general nodding of heads and consensus for that. So we'll just give the clerks a moment to prepare, and then we can move for voting on these.
Thank you. Through the chair, that motion, that selection process is ready, and you may choose up to 2 candidates. Through the chair, the selection has closed, and Patricia Almost and Girish Sankar have been selected, and we will now require a recommendation to appoint those 2 individuals.
Colleagues, I will look now for a mover to appoint, for a motion to recommend those 2 individuals to council for appointment. And that's moved by Councillor Hamou and seconded by Councillor Fife-Millar. And we will open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, that motion's 0.
Thank you, colleagues. Moving on to item 5, we have one matter under deferred matters, additional business. 5.1 is the added application for the issuance of a proclamation for Never Give Up Day. This was a resubmission with some additional information. And I will look to see how colleagues want to dispense with this item. Mayor Holder.
I don't know if I should move to turn this down or wait to see if it loses on a tie. I know that's the future chair, but I'm going to vote against it. And first, I'd like to thank colleagues for getting us some additional information. And I have to say it's noble. Never give up. You know, I've got when I do talks about networking and persistence and determination, there's the cartoon I have of a stork eating a frog halfway through its mouth, and the frog has its hands around the neck of the stork. Never give up, it says. But you know, when I look at this, I see no London connection except that it impacts communities across the country, it says. I see that 5 communities have joined in this Never Give Up Day. And again, a noble sentiment. I don't see any London connection. I don't see any activities in London associated with it. No London connection except someone from Etobicoke, deep respect, is going to be able to say London has joined on, whatever that means, because having read it, I don't know what it means. And you know, it speaks to the issue of proclamations having value and merit in our community and being important in our community, but with no connectivity to London, except that we are a community in Canada. I think it feels hollow to me. And so I don't know where if I'll get support for this, but I guess I'll move a motion to turn it down because at some point we have to draw a line for not so much frivolous, but proclamations that don't impact the city. And you know, if the city stands for so many things, and for someone to not make the effort to find people in London that are prepared to champion it with some activities, some whatever, on whatever day, I just think I think it's a testament to this group if we turn it down to say, you know what, this has to have more meaning because proclamations are supposed to mean something. But if we approve everything, then nothing matters. And we've had some pretty significant proclamations in our time. So I'm going to suggest that we not approve this, and I'll move that motion.
So the motion then, Your Worship, procedurally would be to receive and take no action on the application. And I'll look to see if there's a seconder for that, seconded by Councillor Hamou. We'll look for any discussion from colleagues. Councillor Hamou.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Deputy Mayor Morgan and I sent this individual a letter asking for clarification on how it would relate to London, along with other questions. And it came back with just a cut and paste from his website. So he didn't really answer our questions other than to cut and paste and not really address the issue of London. And so we really did try to hammer that point down. So I am happy to second the motion and just receive it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamou. Any other questions or comments, colleagues? I see none, so we will get the clerk to open the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. Under item 6, confidential matters. This is relating to a land acquisition solicitor-client privilege advice. I will look for a motion now to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Fife Millar, seconded by Deputy Mayor Morgan. And we'll get the clerk to open the vote on that.
Closing the vote, that motion's carried 6-0.
Pause for just a minute to give the clerks the opportunity to get the right people in and out of the Zoom meeting, and then we'll proceed with our in-camera item.